So I had some really good fortune recently. I was able to pick up a used first edition Vorso Flat top fidget spinner. This is one of the original fidget spinners, or at least to my understanding, one of the original ones. And I was able to pick it up used for what I consider to be a very good deal. So just wanted to show everyone this because I've never reviewed a real Vorso on the channel before. And this was actually the first real Vorso flat top that I've gotten my hands on. As you can see, this is the brass V1 flat top. This is the, I believe, the machined version as opposed to the polished version. Polished being 160 pounds in brass, and the machine version being 125 pounds. So it's about $160. And you can buy these today if you want. But most people are actually recommending not buying them because the design is a little bit dated, and we'll get over kind of what that means. Anyway, so here's the box, really cool, really classy. Comes with a second bearing with some really nice buttons here. This is a 608 bearing, hybrid ceramic bearing, really nice stainless steel buttons. These ones seem to be glued together. I cannot separate them no matter how hard I twist. I'm a little hesitant to get pliers on these. This bearing is spinning really nicely, or not that nicely, spinning nicely enough. So I've heard that some of the early Vorsos did have glued buttons, so I'm gonna keep trying these, but maybe just not gonna happen. Anyway, so that is the secondary bearing. And then it comes with a tiny little screwdriver. And this is a brass body screwdriver to match the brass on the flat top. If this had been a copper or stainless steel flat top, the material of the screwdriver would have matched the material of the spinner. So nice attention to detail there. As for the spinner itself, this is sort of like one of the original and most famous pocket, like micro spinners or mini spinners, or whatever you want to call it. It's you can see right here, it's not quite an 1.5 inches wide. Maybe around 1/2 inch thick, maybe a hair over. And as far as the depth or the height, whatever you want to call it, it's about 1 inch. So really pocketable, really small. The spinner is incredibly classy looking. Even now with the matte, just because of the patina, I think it just looks really cool and really classy. Spinning it, you could absolutely tell that it's a 608 bearing. It has that loud scrapey noise. Like here's a R188 bearing. Quite different. It's really smooth and really quiet. Here's a 608 that has some miles on it. Probably a 608 in the need of cleaning as well. So again, this is the brass, which is definitely my preference. And when we talk about the design being dated, a lot of it has to do with this and this, those two little set screws there. And what those do is they hold the bearing in place in the body itself. And that pressure, basically the screw goes in and it applies pressure to the bearing. That inevitably deforms the bearing a little bit. Even just the slightest little bit will affect spin times, so you have to be really careful about how far you tighten that. But regardless, the design is just not optimized for the best possible spin times. So what people do is they replace this 608 bearing with an R188 bearing using the Kong or a similar bearing adapter. I'll do a future video on that. So again, those little screws, those set screws or retention screws, whatever you want to call it, they apply force this way. One goes down, this one goes up, and they hit out here on the bearing. You can see where this goes, trying to get it at an angle to minimize the deformation, but it really just, some effect on spin time is inevitable. Past that, you can see this thing has really nice fit and finish, just really nicely made. All the edges are well done. I've heard about some having sharp corners here. That is not the case. And if you've used a clone Vorso, and I'll do a comparison video in a bit, these edges are just murder. And that's not the case here. They're just really nicely handled. So this thing, I haven't found it to be super comfortable, but it is a nice spinner to have in your pocket. Put it out on your desk. It looks like there's a cool little thing in your desk, not, you know, a weird kid's toy. And you can give it a nice flick. You know, it's not going to go that long. This 608 bearing is just kind of dirty, and plus it's a 608 and they tend not to spin super long, but I like that sound, and I know that that's not the case with everyone. One thing I would point out are these buttons. These are probably the best fidget spinner buttons I've ever used. They're just really nice, low profile stainless steel buttons. They have a they are 608, which I guess is a little bit unfortunate, but they have a machined, these machined rings in them. They have a center button in case you want to try to spin this and balance it on a pen tip, or I know some people even do it with a knife. It seems like not something I tend to do, but I know some people are into it. And anyway, just really nicely made, really comfortable. There's a bit of a scoop for grip, but not so much of a scoop that you feel like you're missing contact with your finger when you put it down. So yeah, I just wanted to call those out, because they are just top notch. If you wanted to buy these replacement V1 grips, that's 26 pounds for these two little things right here. 26 pounds is maybe like, I don't know, $35 or something. So they're definitely not cheap. That's one of the reasons why the Vorso is so expensive. And here's what it looks like without the caps on there. You could see it's a 608 bearing, and it's just held in place in this metal, this brass body with the retention screws. Hybrid ceramic bearing. You could definitely use this spinner without the caps if you're into that sort of thing. It spins really nicely, and the nice thing about the 608 is you have enough room to grab it, whereas that R188, it tends to be too small to spin without something, you know, without caps. I'll do a separate video on spin time. I need to give these bearings a good cleaning. I'm not the first owner of this Vorso Flat Top. I may not even be the second owner. I don't know the full history of it, but it will need some cleaning before I do a spin time video. Anyway, and obviously you can do a desk spin. It's gonna be loud, but it's a 608. And I guess just to wrap up, I would say I actually really like this spinner. I've avoided buying the flat top because it's expensive and the design feels pretty dated to me. But I saw this one, it was a great deal, so I went ahead and gave it a shot. They do seem to hold their resale value, so I don't see buying it as being particularly risky if I didn't like it, but I do. So here it is relative to a standard tri-spinner. Quite a bit smaller than your standard SpinTech, or in this case a Yomaxer. And this actually runs a 608, so they're not all that loud. I may actually get this 608 and put it in here, since this is a really nice, this is the 608, this is the Bronson Speedco Raw, which I think is a pretty solid 608. Listen to this relative to this guy. Obviously different materials, but you could tell a lot less grindy. Lastly, here's the Vorso against its, I guess at the time, its primary competitor, which is the Torque Bar. Torque Bar has seemingly aged a lot better, even though they're, I think, came out about the same time. Maybe the torque bar is a little bit ahead of it. But the torque bar goes for that smaller, that R188 size bearing. I know it's not technically an R188, but it's that smaller class of bearing, which gets you that just better spin, quieter. And the torque bar sort of kind of stood out on its own, even now, you know, a year later or whatever, where the Vorso has sort of faded away. In past reviews, I have looked at that knockoff Vorso. Those are becoming more and more readily available, so check that out. I'll link back to it, and then I'll do some more videos on this, which it seems like, despite its age and despite the price tag, people are very interested in this flat top still. It is a pretty interesting spinner. So yeah, it's a Vorso Flat Top V1 in brass. Thanks for watching.